As we continue to follow the breaking news of Nicolas Maduro's capture, we are also hearing from some local lawmakers here in South Florida. Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart hosted a news briefing on Venezuela from his Doral office within the last half hour.
It is an important day for the American people. It is a crucial day for the entire hemisphere, and it is the one thing that all of us have all been saying, that the solution, the real solution for the Venezuelan people was total, absolute democracy and freedom returning to Venezuela.
Senator Ashley Moody and Representatives Carlos Jimenez and Maria Elvira Salazar also shared their support of Maduro's capture.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is among a group of lawmakers saying tonight the administration's actions were inconsistent with what top officials had laid out in briefings throughout recent months. Joining me now is the host of Facing South Florida, Jim DeFede. And Jim, many are questioning President Trump's comments that the U.S. will run Venezuela until a safe transition can take place. That seemed to be a surprise to many people. What would something like that even look like?
That's what we're waiting to find out. It's really not clear. When he was asked that question repeatedly by reporters at today's press conference, he finally just pointed over his shoulder to Marco Rubio and the defense secretary and essentially said they'll be in charge. Now, I don't expect that Marco Rubio will be flying to Caracas anytime soon to take control of the government. But, you know, the president also said that he expected the Venezuelan vice president to cooperate fully with the United States. And then about 2 hours later, the vice president of Venezuela, I guess she's now the president of Venezuela, I think she's been sworn in, basically made it clear that they had no interest in being a colonial entity of the United States and called for the immediate release of Nicolas Maduro. So it's really hazy at this point as to how this goes forward. President Trump has talked about not being shy about sending more troops in. Look, I can tell you that from the MAGA base standpoint, they do not want regime change in a way that means U.S. military involvement in any prolonged way. I think they'll put up with the idea of going in, snatching, grabbing Nicolas Maduro and getting out of the country. But if this turns into something more akin to what happened in Libya or in Iraq or any other place, they're going to have a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, interesting to hear the president say that he doesn't believe that Maria Corina Machado has the respect of the Venezuelan people despite her winning the election. Now, a minute ago, you just mentioned Secretary of State Marco Rubio. In the past, President Trump has actually lauded him, saying that he will go down in history as the best Secretary of State in the history of the United States. How heavy a hand do you think he had in this plan?
Look, I don't think any of this would have taken place if Marco Rubio wasn't the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. I think Marco Rubio, this is his moment. This is what he's waited for, real power. And I think he's had that, and he's found this instrument in Donald Trump in being able to do this. And let's be clear what the ultimate objective is. By going after Nicolas Maduro, by going after Venezuela, that is a direct shot at Cuba. That is a belief that if you have taken out Venezuela, you then deny the Cuban government the oil reserves that they so desperately need to keep that country's lights on. And by shutting that out, it's not just a message that the United States is now feeling more militarily prone to sort of intervening and could go in and snatch up, Canel in Cuba, or, for that matter, somebody in, the president of Colombia or any other place that some people are now calling for him to do. But I think it's really an attempt to try to destabilize the Cuban government as well. And it's part of what Donald Trump is now, I think they're now referring to it as the Donroe doctrine, as opposed to the Monroe doctrine that Donald Trump has put his name to it, that basically the Western Hemisphere is United States territory, and they feel free now in a way that we haven't seen in a very long time to go anywhere that they so choose in Latin America and exert its influence.
Yeah, Jim, from all the reporters spread out all across South Florida, we've heard people talking about not just Venezuela, but also Cuba, Colombia, even Nicaragua. So it'll be interesting to see how this all trickles down possibly to other countries in the Caribbean and South America as well. Jim DeFede, thanks so much for your insight as always.
Thank you.